how we have to make a device that many things are there in the nature. We have to learn the solutions. The nature provides and the solution for the sake of this kind of social events prevailing and how that thing is to be reduced from the existence of the society. Nature created a diversity. That all the elements of the nature are in different form, has certain purpose. Man is also a supra-animal, a power of judgment. All kinds of intellects are there. It has also some purpose. Purpose to maintain the harmony, to maintain the harmonious blend of nature. A rose, a marigold, a lotus are found near the jasmine. They are the beautiful flowers. They don't compete to one another. They are glory of the garden. Out of our intellectuals and units, we are all together. We are having a different properties, characteristics, thinking, everything to maintain the glory of the society. We have to find out that our value system is completely eroded, that the harmony, our spirituality, that should be given a priority to think over it, and self-realization and self-love, that is the best mechanism through which all the social evils that can be rather mitigated, controlled and eradicated from the society. In the inclusive urban development, the flagship of the government of India, the smart city, where all the parameters are there, but this aspect is very much lagging. How we have to design and frame the whole of the smart city, where the safety and security and protection of this kind of an ingredient of the society, they are supposed to be run. So my submission is there. We have to nurture the student from. We have to nurture all the entities, the responsibility of the parent that have to nurture the kids and very early stages of their children, that both are equal. Nature has created diversity, and we are diverse, but we are equal. But because there is no inequality created by the nature, but we have to follow the creation of the nature, that people are equal, having a different character and different role to play in the drama of life, to maintain the harmonious blend of nature. So from the family, from the school, from colleges, if this kind of approach is to be nurtured to that level, I am very much confident, I am very much sure that the whole problem of the society will be rather wiped out from this kind, and that provide the base for the peaceful coexistence of the society, to run side by side, contribute for the sake of development of the nations. I am really very thankful for all of you who have joined this kind of workshop, and I am very much confident that 3-day deliberations, many more resource persons have come from different parts of India. From Hyderabad, Professor Shahida Murtuza is there, and again the Sandhya Mahimakar from Mumbai, she is architectural and planners. So from the different walk of life, different departments, different organizations, their views and idea will bring a new way, a new orientation, to bring a kind of solution to reduce this kind of village prevailing in the society, and provided the way for the peaceful coexistence and maintain the harmonious blend of nature. Thank you very much for your patience hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With the thought-provoking speech, in his welcome address, Professor Ateef Ahmed has described aims and objectives of this workshop in a nutshell. I would now call upon Dr. Kavita Sharma to deliver and to enthuse us with her views and ideas. Dr. Kavita Sharma.
Honorable Vice Chancellor of Aligarh Muslim University, Professor Tariq Mansoor, the Professor Amitabh Kundu, the Chief Guest of the of this program. Professor Muhammad Shakir, Professor Atiq Ahmed, Dr. Rashmi Singh, Professor Soumya Rajulu, my very distinguished colleagues in the audience, students, ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful to you for having invited me to this very historic and iconic university with such a rich tradition and such a rich history. We are already running very late, so I will try to bullet point what I have to say. My first issue is that women are critical to development and to the creation of an egalitarian society. In the welcome address, my colleague has already elaborated on this. But if women are to be critical to development, my own hypothesis is, as a lay person, I'm not an economist or an urban planner, it is that we will have to change what we mean by development. And for this I will again not elaborate on it, but what is one of my favorite farewell speeches by the noted environmentalist David Orr, he points out that the current environmental degradation, which has a great impact on our lives, has not been created by uneducated people, it has been created by educated people. And everything worth living for, whether it is air, water, forest, land, is all degraded and polluted. He goes on to point out 6 myths of education. Again, I will not elaborate, but first is ignorance is a solvable problem, which it is not. We have only created much, much larger areas of ignorance for ourselves. With enough knowledge and technology, we can manage the planet Earth. Not true, as we can see on our pulses, not true. Knowledge, as knowledge increases, human goodness will increase. Not true, we know that. We can adequately restore what we have destroyed with our science and technology. Not true. The purpose of education is that we must produce people who will ready for employment. Not true. We have to create minds and not people just who will go out and get a job, because by the time they go out, the job market would have changed, and that our culture represents the acme of development. Not true. So he also talks about alternate model of development, because the current model is built on the Reformation, Renaissance, Industrial Revolution and onwards, where sky is the limit, where nature is subservient to human beings and can be used to create more and more of human goods and facilities for ourselves. But an alternate model of development would put human beings at the center of development. And in this, I have been long associated with Self-Employed Women's Association, and every year I do 5 or 6 workshops with the grassroots women. And I have learned a lot from them. I don't know what they have learned from me, but I certainly have learned a lot from them. And all our feminist theories I have learned to put aside, just looking at the grit, determination and odds that these women fight against and yet come out successful. So 2 books have impressed me a lot, and that is Ila Bhatt's Anubandh, and the other one is We Are Poor But So Many, and We Are So Many. In Anubandh, she talks about the 100-mile community, which is an arbitrary number, 100 miles. You can take it as 50 miles, 150 miles, whatever you like, within which food, clothing, shelter, primary health facilities, work, and a sustainable environment should be created. And in that she claims that it is not products that are a problem, but our relationship with products that is a problem. For example, a tree, for a mango tree, which is universally found throughout the country, it is not just wood. It is a tree that gives fruit, which is used for medicinal purposes. It provides shelter, it gives resting place for birds. Its roots, go deep into the ground and provide, their health provides the nourishment for producing medicines, dyes, cordage, all comes from that tree. So the tree is not just wood, which you just cut down and use as wood. And that is the thought process that leads to movements like the Chipko movement, which was run primarily by women. Somehow women seem to be more nurturing and caring and more sensitive to the environment than actually men are. And again, as she points out, it is our handicrafts people, our potters, our weavers, our dyers, our embroiderers, they are actually highly skilled workers and they have kept our traditions alive. We cannot marginalize them. And so the way our development is going, we would have destroyed our skills which are already prevalent and which women have major charge of. Even our farming women, they are the ones who know about seed diversity, preservation of crop in times of distress, but they are dismissed as backward, inefficient, unrealistic, and this cannot be the goal. So therefore what she talks about, and which I think is very pertinent for us, we should move from national self-reliance, notions of national self-reliance, to community self-reliance. If the community is self-reliant, the nation will in itself be self-reliant. And in this, so we have to bring all these services near to the community. For example, justice. When justice moves to a distant place, there is no pressure on that community to do any justice, gender or otherwise. The individual cannot thrive without a family. The family cannot thrive without a conducive community in which to thrive, and therefore it requires food, housing, clothing, banking, education, healthcare, all that should be brought to the community, and with respect to the faith of everybody, beliefs, lifestyles, and all aspects. And these are all interrelated aspects. You can't take away the culture and faith and beliefs from development. Development is not a project about building systems and institutions or even economics, but restoring the balance between community and the individual. So, and then I come to question, what is actually an egalitarian society? Now, I have, at least as I told you, learned to treat with respect the semi-literate women who are poor but determined to overcome all odds. And so she says that, for example, the Gujarati custom of calling everyone Behan, it's Behan, right, which is sister. So that creates a sisterhood. So unless in the community we create that women's community, we create that kind of sisterhood, women will not be able to overcome the obstacles that they are surrounded with. And poverty will be perpetuated if the women cannot come together. It is this thought that led to the Seva movement, which is a coming together of a cooperative, trade cooperative, and a trade union. Now, the women are really traders. They are rags pickers who store rags to make different kinds of goods. Quilts, they work on piece rate. It has led to the formation of a large trade union, but they are also fighting for identity as self-employed women workers. They are also vendors. They are fighting for space on the streets because with our malls and large department stores, we tend to gobble up the street space where these vendors can actually go. They are looking for a Seva bank, which has been established for microloans to these poor women. Very interestingly, Ilaben told me that when they went there, the official refused to register their bank and refused to register their trade union because they said that you are illiterate women, you can't manage all this. So of course they went back and said, we will learn how to sign, we will learn how to write, and they got rudimentary education for themselves. But she says, I was looking at this official and I was wondering who is illiterate. Because whether the women were illiterate or the official was illiterate. So the way forward is to produce groups who can build their own assets. who also enhance the capacity of their own selves to compete against the bigger players in the labor market, who have not only access to insurance and child, but also to healthcare and childcare. Because poor health, women's health is always neglected in homes. Poor health brings down productivity. And so it has to be delivered. And you know, this is what happens even those who have been involved with women's study centers and universities. They realize that you can't deal with one subject. Women's problems are all interrelated. From patriarchy to health to childcare to be able to go out and work to education. So they are all interrelated. You can't work on one without working on the other. So women need to be placed at the center for economic reform, and they should be allowed to build strong, vital organizations on issues which are relevant to them. These ideas go back really to Gandhi's ideas with his emphasis on simplicity and a realization that complexity is not necessarily progress. A lot of good comes out of simplicity. Ideas of non-violence, because when these women come together as a trade union, this union is not against anybody at all. It is a union to come together to help each other to develop a particular trade. And that helps them to set up shop and also be competitive. So that's why I said it is a combination of coming together not against somebody but in support of each other, and through that getting their own getting their own enhancement. So these are the women who sell fruits, vegetables on streets. These are the women who stitch clothes and sell piece rate work, laborers in the construction market. They sell commodities. They collect recyclable refuse, so they are rag pickers and turn them into useful things. And they usually operate outside the realm of labor law because they are supposed to be unorganized work. But they are the actually most organized. And when I was director in India International Center, I had got a series of talks done on organized, unorganized. Because we call them unorganized labor, but that's not true. Unorganized, they would just perish. So these are the support of the families usually falls on the shoulders of these women. The men often have a drinking problem, and therefore there are other issues in the house, health issues. So with this, different forms of exploitation come both within and outside, in the outside world. The glimmer of light is when they can manage to come together and find a voice. They have immense faith that they can bring about change. I'm really surprised because there are a whole hierarchy of workers there. A semi-literate woman finally graduates to being a spokesperson, goes to ILO, goes to World Bank, makes out a case, right? So gradually new services have to be added to them. The people who joined here was Devaki Jain to begin Seva, who is a very noted Gandhian economist. People like Rehana Jhabwala, who is an economist, trained at Harvard and Yale, and they brought these women together to organize the whole thing. So therefore, as I said, we are running out of time, so I have just bullet pointed it. When I went there, I started there, I found that there was a gap forming between the first generation and their second generation, because the second generation was getting educated. The women who had sacrificed so much to educate their second generation were feeling very marginalized in their own homes because their sons and daughters were saying that you don't know anything. So I did a lot of workshops in trying to bridge that gap. And I got the children to make a family tree, matriarchal family tree. Where did your mother come from? Where did your grandmothers come from? What were their struggles? And that led to a huge amount of awareness among the children of the struggles. Also, we started writing stories about their own culture. And I said, ask your grandmothers about the myths, about the tales, about the songs, about the poetry that they know, they recite, and that has brought about some kind of a shift and into a greater amount of harmony. The second generation is also coming forward now to do more highly skilled jobs like running computers, by doing accounts, so another hierarchy is forming. Now, dividing the economy into formal and informal is perhaps not the way to go. Also, it is a model based on so-called developed countries, where the countries develop on the basis of creating jobs. The emphasis should be on creating entrepreneurs, not jobs. Because unless you become a job giver, rather than always seeking a job, you will not have the independence and you will not make the economy grow. So with these few words, I will close. As I said, we are already running very short on time. I want to close with a favorite quote of mine. This is by Sir Arthur Helps. How beautiful looks water on a flower bedewing the grass, rushing down as a mountain torrent, rolling on as a mighty river, and expanding itself into a vast lake like this. Surely, water is the woman of inanimate creation, versatile, fluent, lovely, untamable, and dangerous. Because women together, when they come together and decide to do something, nothing can stop them. They will go on plugging away till the rock breaks and the water finds its way. Thank you very much.
With difference in patriarchal and matriarchal society, and she is a grassroots worker, so she related culture to the jobs, and in the end she very beautifully described a woman. Thank you, Dr. Kavita Sharma. Now I will call upon Dr. Rashmi Singh. She is also a grassroots worker. She is presently Secretary of Delhi Municipal Council. Before that, earlier, she was working in the arena of women empowerment. Dr. Rashmi.
The various academicians and practitioners who are present in this hall, students, it's a great pleasure for me to be here in this beautiful campus, which has its own history, and on a topic which is very, very contemporary today. And I have been very much associated with this entire concept of gender budgeting and demystifying the various notions involved with it. Because I was with the Ministry of Women and Child, as one of the building blocks of this Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao movement. But more than just a rhetoric and more than just a campaign, our work was to see how we can actually internalize the whole thing in terms of concrete measures, in terms of policies which can actually change things, not just in a jure manner, but also substantive change, de facto. So that is the biggest challenge, and the challenge also today is not just coming up with ideas, but putting those into practice, not just coming up with legislations, but putting those into practice. So I'm happy that this entire exercise of this 2-day workshop is bringing together the various, kind of stakeholders who are needed to deliberate together, understand notions, concepts together, and also take collective responsibility together, which means the academia and the policy makers and the youth of today, the municipal managers, the executors on the ground. So having said that, I would just like to share some insights on the topic derived not from theory, but from my experiences on the ground as a practitioner, in what they tell us about what this gender perspective is all about. Because gender budgeting as such, you may go into the topic in detail over the course of the next 2 years. days that you'll be deliberating on it. But gender perspective, when it comes to urban planning, when it comes to urban design, when it comes to mainstreaming the issue of gender into your planning process, designing process and execution process, what does it really mean? I think it is important for me to take practical examples to be able to do that. In terms of certain practical examples, now let me take you through our own, ULB, the urban local body, which I represent, the New Delhi Municipal Council, as like a case study. Now, when I look at this case study, now what are the areas that, can probably have the gender dimension for any body like this? Well, shelter, of course, housing, how safe, how affordable it is for women, the issue of mobility, how we have managed to facilitate mobility of women, which has a much significant impact on the entire women work ratio, women, work participation. If the mobility is not good enough, it severely impacts. And I'm very happy that while I was sitting here on the dais, the Vice Chancellor actually asked me that, what are you doing in Delhi about the environmental concerns? And the answer which I gave was that vehicular pollution is a huge thing, which again limits the participation of people who may not really be moving in cars, who are totally dependent upon public transport. So it is issues like these, even in the transport, say if you do not have, spaces where women feel safe, buses which are overcrowded, or taxis, which women do not find safe or affordable. So those questions are the ones which we look into when we look at specific examples of how the theory translates into practice. The entire issue of what a local body can do for creating economic opportunity, how it can make education more gender sensitive, and another issue which I would like to talk about a little bit is about the entire thing about wellness. Now, wellness is physical and emotional wellness both. Physical we normally understand, by making provisions, maybe for creating dispensary, for creating hospitals, but do we really understand what emotional wellness is all about? It is very important that we take cognizance of the fact that depression, fear psychosis, stress, these are growing by the day. And what are we doing as government, as ULB, to really look at solutions which can mitigate all these stresses, which may not be, visible at the outset, but which can have very grave consequences. And last but not the least, I would like to talk about the participation. Because whatever you do, unless women participate, unless women fully own it up, and unless women are there in the process from the beginning till the end, no solution is good enough. So having said that, now let me just take you through again just 5 minutes if I have. I'll give certain practical examples about, say, roads and streets, improving walkability, and what does it mean? Footpaths, how safe the pedestrians are. So these are certain things which we as ULPs are mandated to do, and look at the gender, balance which it involves in terms of the street lights, how effective they are they located properly, is the location properly, or we need to relocate it. We had a recent gender audit conducted. In that gender audit, we were actually looking at figures where the lights were not located at proper places, the fixtures are missing, or if the fixtures are there, they were not really operational. So the fixture is there, but the light is not there. So they are not fully operational. And third, the light, fixture, everything is there, but the tree needs pruning. So there's still a dark patch. So all these things, when you look at it, is actually gender sensitive planning, designing and execution. This is just one example. So improving that walkability would involve how to improve the your street lighting is, identifying the dark spots. Then we also look at like smart ways of improving connectivity through Wi-Fi connect, through creating CCTVs and the feed going into our control rooms. Then another thing which improves mobility is creating as many public toilets which women would really need. Now this was an area which was really ignored for a substantial length of time. But we have really focused on these, and I would encourage all of you who come to Delhi to visit, if not use, of our public toilets, which have state-of-the-art equipments including sanitary vending machines. Now we are coming up to even things like baby feeding rooms. Imagine a woman who's out the whole day needing private space to feed the baby. So some places like those, they're providing bus queue shelters. And another thing which we realized was that affordable connectivity would require thinking about the last mile connectivity too. You get it from the metro, you get it from the bus, but you have to walk for substantial length of time. So what can be the other option? So we have come up with a scheme recently of bike sharing, so public bike sharing. So I would encourage you to have a look at what it is all about, because it's all GPS enabled, very safe, and a monthly card is there. So women are really taking to these things more. Then in terms of infrastructure, we have things like working men hostel, old age homes for women, senior citizen recreation centers, creating temporary shelter for women and girls, running creches for children of working mothers. So all these things again aid the aspect of mobility, especially to support women who are in the workspace or who aspire to do more. Well, I spoke about emotional wellness. Now here the kind of spaces that we are trying to create is those public spaces which were earlier like dark spots, and now we call them happiness area. And in terms of happiness area, there are like fountains, there's good illumination, and there's good street furniture. And also we have like things called wellness centers. So these wellness centers are for therapeutic treatment. So this entire thing about keeping women, healthy, which has its own, effect on work participation. So it's not typically just the hostel and the dispensary, it's going beyond that. Then the other thing which I would like to just introduce you is introducing that idea at, very, very nascent age, which is catch them young, which is make school education system itself, sensitive enough so that your curriculum is, engendered. So in all the municipal schools, because many of you are the managers here, and I would strongly encourage you to see how sensitive not only the curriculum, but the way the curriculum is being imparted, the kind of language being used, that's very, very important for the teachers to continuously be, sensitized on this entire notion of what a gender appropriate language should be, and not just the teachers. In any municipality or the government, we have gender sensitive workshops. Why? Because it's not important just to have a sexual harassment committee put in letter, but in spirit it is important that we know what it is to have an environment which is safe and conducive for women. Well, in the schools, things like nurturing sporting talents, we have something called Football Academy for Girls, only to increase the confidence, because self-defense and all you keep hearing about. But small thing like, nurturing sports, brings in like great vitality which is required for the women themselves, the girls themselves, to improve their participation and feel more empowered. And girls with special needs to special schools. The economic opportunity part, often this gets lagged in many of the local bodies, but we are, doing a lot to identify things which may not be typical gender stereotype. So looking at skills which can be imparted to give like better economic opportunities in terms of upcoming market of like maybe renewable energy, maybe as health technicians. So there are skill centers, women training institutes, then equipping our public libraries also with technology to empower girls, and making use of ICT to create more of digital interactive information panels at different places. Because information, knowledge is power. So don't keep it under wraps. So the idea is how much like public information we can put in the public domain. So that's one thing we're focusing on. We are also focusing on creating these modern kiosks for police booths where even FIR can be filed online. Setting up ideation center for the youth, for nurturing creativity, that again is showing good results. That you just have to give that environment where things like safety app, panic button, so all these small things, where women themselves come up with their felt need, that what is it that we really need. And I would, like to just end by talking about some of the things which we do to improve citizen engagement, which often gets ignored. Because that's very important. It may not be through direct measures of saying that come and attend a workshop or a meeting, but ways in which we can promote socio-cultural activities, artistic activities, say our subways, which were not safe earlier, but creative use of those public spaces like subways, maybe for just having painting exhibitions, parks, maybe having things like music in the park. So all those things are intended not only to improve the harmony as a whole, but also like bring more women in public spaces. And in my experience of having worked in this field for 20 years, I feel more critical mass we create of more women in the public spaces, the safer our public spaces are going to become, the more empowered women are going to feel. And lastly, I would just end by saying that we need to look at good practices. We need to look at what has worked on ground. We need to replicate those. And with that in view, I have recently completed my thesis, my PhD, which is looking at some of those good practices of what has worked. And as Kavita ji says, the integrated approach. So my PhD is all about convergence. What schemes, how they can, be implemented on the ground in a manner in which there is better convergence, better coordination, and things about which one of the students here, research scholar, talked to me that, well, the policy is there, but women workers say they don't